Super Smash Bros. This experimental crossover fighting game has quickly become one of the most beloved Nintendo franchises, and with the release of the Nintendo Switch 2, fans of the series are wondering if there will be any new entry to the series on the powerful new system. We're here today to fill you in on everything we know about the new Smash game and our predictions on what the new release may look like.
You really can't mention Smash without talking about the man who makes it all happen. Sakurai is the series director of Smash Bros. And has been with it since its conception in the 90s. His strong work ethic is really never rivaled by anyone. The real reason why Smash Bros. Is so good is thanks in no small part to the high standards he holds himself to and his team as well at HAL Laboratories and now Sora. Unfortunately for fans of the series, Sakurai says Smash Ultimate is the last game in this one.
Yeah, but he has said that about pretty much every Smash Bros. Game since Melee at this point. Despite being burnt out on the series, he's also extremely protective of his IPs and comes back to direct each Smash Bros. Game every time Nintendo threatens to appoint a new series director. And outside of empty threats, it is difficult to believe that Nintendo would hire anyone other than trusted Sakurai to direct a Smash game.
True, but Sakurai seems serious about it this time. I mean, after decades of working on Smash, he took a break from game design to create a YouTube channel.
A noble pursuit if I've ever heard of one.
Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games is a channel teaching game design with lessons written by Sakurai himself. If you have any interest in game design at all, be sure to check out the channel. He has a lot of insight and explains game design concepts in a clear, concise, and approachable way.
Once he finished his game design video series on the channel, completing his YouTube career, we know, according to one of the last videos on the channel, that Nintendo approached him about coming back to direct a new game. Sakurai and his team are such a powerhouse, Nintendo knew any game he would make would be quality. So to sweeten the deal, they would allow Sakurai and Sora to make any game their hearts desire. And in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, we got to see what this dream game was. Kirby Air Riders.
Yeah, this makes sense as Sakurai is the creator of Kirby and obviously has an affinity for the little guy. But while this game looks fantastic, it is also a clue for the release of the next Smash game. If Sakurai has been devoting all this time to Kirby Air Riders 2, that would mean he would have only just begun development on the next Smash this year, late 2025.
As unlikely as it is that Nintendo would develop a Smash game without Sakurai, it's also possible. The franchise is wildly successful, and a new entry in the series would no doubt help move Switch 2 units. I believe that we can actually predict what Nintendo will do with the Smash series by analyzing their tactics with another one of their powerhouse franchises, Mario Kart. First things first, Nintendo has been pushing out Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games, and Smash Bros. Ultimate is an obvious choice for this style of upgrade. Fighting games rely on frame-perfect commands, so there would be a huge market for people wanting a performance upgrade for Smash with an unlocked frame cap. Since Switch 2 is capable of 120 frames per second, I would personally love to see Smash running at that exact frame rate. Upgrading and updating Smash Ultimate would also be the perfect way to get Sakurai back into the swing of developing Smash Bros. Without jumping right into the next game.
Yes, but to justify these Switch 2 editions, Nintendo has been adding more content to the games. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, for example, have extra collectibles and Nintendo Switch app support. As such, I think it's fair to say that Smash Ultimate Switch 2 Edition would also have extra content in it as well, say 4 extra characters maybe? Or some sort of compatibility with their app that no one wants.
But would this really tide people over for the years and years it takes to develop a new Smash game? This is where the Mario Kart analogy comes into play. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was originally a Wii U game, packaged together with all of its DLC for Switch as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Then, years after that release, new DLC was put out for the game to tide over players waiting for the next mainline entry. Now, DLC for a game that was 8 years old at the time was practically unheard of, but it makes sense that Smash Ultimate may get the same treatment.
New fighter announcements were a staple of driving up hype during Nintendo Directs, and it would make sense for Nintendo to want the same engagement for the Nintendo Switch 2 Directs in the future. A Switch 2 edition of Smash Ultimate with a new fighter pass only makes sense.
So, if that is the route they go, what does that mean for the next mainline Smash entry? Well, to figure that out, let's look at what Nintendo did for Mario Kart World. Mario Kart 8 was a beautiful game that perfected the gameplay formula for the series and had practically every track you could ever want to race on. In the same way, Smash Ultimate perfected the gameplay and has every character you could ever want to play in a Smash game, all balanced perfectly. Well, except for...
So how does Nintendo make the next Smash Bros. Better when the game is already perfect? Well, to answer that, let's see how Mario Kart solved this problem. Adding in the open world as well as adding new mechanics such as wall riding and grinding make Mario Kart World play completely differently than any other game in the series, as well as raise the skill ceiling of the competitive scene substantially. These new gameplay mechanics were created to make up for the fact that there was no competing with Mario Kart 8's impressive roster of tracks, which previously was its biggest selling point.
Similarly, it would be extremely unlikely that the next Smash would have as many fighters as Smash Ultimate. The entire gimmick was that everyone is here, and it's a miracle that Nintendo was able to pull off the legal magic to acquire the rights to so many IPs. So, if the next Smash cannot compete with Ultimate's impressive roster, the only way to make it a superior game is to iterate on the gameplay and the formula. This could look like new special moves, improved single player, maybe even a cinematic story mode like Subspace Emissary.
No matter what it is, if development on the game is starting now, it will likely be years and years before we find out.
But if you want to see more Smash Bros. Content in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to Sample Text. See you in the next video.